Hi there everyone, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another Miss Ink Stamps video. Today we're going to be making actually a couple of cards. Let's talk about what we're using first. I have the brand new Some Pig stamps and the matching dies. It's a big stamp set. There's 3 different kinds of pigs. You've got all kinds of little ducks and chicks. You even have a rat, and you have all the things to make a little barn scene, which is so cute. We also are going to be using this harvest paper pack. I've been using that quite frequently lately, and because it's great for this time of year. So let's go ahead and get started with our stamping. Because I'm going to make 2 cards, I'm going to stamp these images twice. I just want to make sure that I have plenty of room on this cardstock. This is some Express It cardstock. It's a good blending cardstock for alcohol markers. So I'll close up my Misty, and then I'm going to ink those up using some Simon Hurley Creates Stellar ink in the color Black Widow, which is really good for alcohol marker coloring also. So we're going to stamp that out. It does a good job stamping, so then we're going to flip it and we're going to stamp it again. This just makes it super easy to make several cards. And I don't know where I want to put these on the card. I just figured I'd grab a bunch of images and we'll stamp them out. So let's get started with our coloring next. I'm only going to color the one set. Because I'm going to color both of them the exact same, but I'm going to put all those colors up on the screen for you. I'm going lightest to darkest for all of my coloring today, and this I thought was a good color for our little pig, cute little baby pig there, and he is so sweet. I love this little farm scene, and we're going to do the exact same thing with the other little pig. I figured I would put 2 pigs on the card. Not sure if I was going to put one on the inside or both on the outside. I hadn't completely decided at this point because that kind of comes later. Like I said, I really like to just stamp out a lot of images and then play around with how those are going to go later on. But you have a lot to choose from in this stamp set, which is so great. All right, then we're going to add a little pink to his ears and his cheeks. Same thing on this one. And we're just kind of feathering that out for his ears. And then we'll move on to his hooves. And I'm not going to add any shadowing or shading to that one. And then we're going to do the hay bale. So I'll start coloring that hay bale just with this one yellow-orange color. And these are Olo markers, by the way. I'm sure you can tell because it says it right on the marker. And then we're going to add a little bit darker shade to that, just where I think the shadowing and shading would be good. Then we can move on to coloring up the barn door. I like how this barn door has like an opening. That's fun. And there isn't a die for the barn door, but we are going to cut that out. So there are a couple spots where I end up going out of line, and not a big deal because I end up like right there. I end up cutting this one out right on the line. So I'm not too worried about it. You could add a little bit of a white border, but I decided not to. And then we'll try to add a little bit of wood grain to it. And then we just have those few little images left. We've got the duck, the chick, the rat, and we have our little spider, which the spider is pretty small. And there, as you saw in the stamp set, there are several spiders to choose from. There's lots of webs. Some of the webs say things, and so that's kind of fun. There's words like greetings and hello, which I thought was sweet. And I'm going to use both of those since I'm making 2 cards today. We're going simple with our duck and our chick. Just use a little bit of C1 for the duck. We're using the same color that we did on our hay bale for our chick. And then we'll add a little orange for his beak and his little feet. All right, so let's bring in those matching dies. Like I said, we don't have a matching die for the barn door, but that's okay because we're going to just fussy cut that out. I got to flip this around. I realized this isn't working, so then I flip it and it works just fine. But you have all those dies for all the rest of the images, which is great. Run that through our die cutting machine, and then now we can fussy cut out each of our barn doors. And I'm going to end up being off screen here, but like I said, I'm going right on the line. Super simple to do on this one because it's just a bunch of straight lines. You're not having to go around too much. There are a couple of hinges on the door, but that's not a big deal. All right, we're trimming down our paper. We're going to make this one into an easel card when the time comes. So I do have a long strip. That one was measured to 4 1/4 by 11 inches. And we're going to cut down some of this paper. This is 4 inches. I'll cut it down even more when the time comes, but right now we're going to cut it down to 4 inches. Kind of playing around with how that door is going to go on our little background. And I decide to bring in this darker pattern, and that's going to go behind the door. Just want to make sure I cut it correctly. So I'll cut 2 of those. I think they're about 2 inches, and that'll give me enough room to glue those down to the back of the door frame. So we'll just trim these down here in a second. And this is what I'm going to end up stamping the spider web on. And I decide to heat emboss it. I will say, if I had to do it again, I probably use a lighter color cardstock, and I probably wouldn't heat emboss it. The heat embossing ended up losing some of the detail, which is kind of funny. It lost some of the detail of the web. And so you couldn't really tell what the words were saying on the web. So that was a little bit of a bummer for me, but live and learn. And I decided I was just going to keep it the way it is. Now you're probably wondering, why did I just tape those down and not glue them? It's because I want to heat emboss, but I don't, if it doesn't work out, I don't want to have to like start all over. So I'm just taping those down with a little bit of mint tape. I'm pulling out the spider webs that I want to use. I'm going to bring in some clear embossing ink, and then I have some fine detail white embossing powder. And I need to use a anti-static powder tool on both of those. Just to make sure that we don't have powder sticking where I don't want it to stick. And then we'll ink up each of our stamps and stamp it down. And when I first cover it with the embossing powder, you can still pretty much read the words. I just think these ones, yeah, the embossing made it bigger, and so it kind of made it hard to read. So that one says greetings. But yeah, if you don't heat emboss it, you can read them fine. I just was in a bit of a time crunch, so I couldn't redo these. So I'm going to stamp out this next one, and that one says hello. And then we'll heat emboss that one. And then once those are heat embossed, I'm going to leave the tape where it is, and I'm going to grab out some liquid glue to adhere down the door frame to that paper. So you'll see what I'm going to do. I'm just going to lift the door frame back, just put a little line of glue, and go all around those 3 sides. And then once that's on there, you can peel that tape back. But that everything's going to stay where it's supposed to. Same thing with this one. Easy peasy. And then we'll be ready to start building our little scenes. So I'll glue down my door frame with my spider web onto this patterned paper. And then I will end up trimming that down because I'm making an A2 size card. This needs to be shorter than that. So I'm actually going to trim it down so that some of that green from our base will show, like that'll be the grass. So I'm just trimming this down to be, I don't even know what size. I just picked on the pattern where I was going to cut it down. And then you got this nice green border all around, and then the bottom is like grass. So we'll glue this down. And then I'm going to bring in a marker, and we'll add some little bits of grass. Some of that gets lost by when I build up the scene, and then I can add it back later, but that just kind of gives it that look of grass. Giving some texture to it. And now I'm going to glue the little goose to the top of our hay bale and our little chick to the corner once I get our spider down. And then once the chick is on the corner, I'm going to flip over the pig and our hay bale, and we're going to add some foam tape to the back of both of those just to add a little bit more dimension to that. Once we have the backs covered, we'll peel off that release paper, and then we can start building up our scene. So we'll put that down. See, a lot of that grass ended up getting lost. I'll add more later. Peel off the release paper of our pig. I did put some down on the rat, and I put him down, and then I decided it was just way too much going on at the bottom of our piece. So I'm going to pick him up, and I am going to peel off that release paper, and we're just going to glue him down to the top of the door jamb. Or maybe I don't glue them. I guess I stick them down with the foam tape. We'll stamp out our sentiment, which says, "Your some friend." Such a sweet play on those words. And then we'll trim this down. And then we can adhere this to the front of our card panel. And I'm just going to use the liquid glue to do that. And now we need to make our base. So our base measured 4 1/4 by 11 inches. We're going to score that at 5 1/2 inches. So this is super simple to do one of these easel cards. You definitely want to score it right in the center. So that'd be 5 1/2 inches. And then where you score it next is dependent on you. I scored it at 3 inches. Not a big deal where you decide to score that. But you're going to fold it in like you would a regular A2 size card. And then the next part you're going to fold inward. So that's how it's going to make your easel. So it'll fold in just like so. So when it sits up, it'll sit like that. So where you want to add your glue is not to your panel. You're going to add it to your base just on that area at the bottom of your fold. And then you'll stick your panel down on top of that. It's obviously not going to be connected at the top, but that's okay. You need it to do that. And then you need something for your easel to get caught on. So I've got not only that piece of pattern paper, but I want it to be a little thicker. So I'm going to add it to a piece of cardstock. You could use some foam tape, but I would use a very low profile foam tape, if that makes any sense. You don't want the real thick stuff. So yeah, you could use a low profile one. Or stack up several pieces of cardstock. Even if it's scrap cardstock, that would work really fine too. And I'm going to glue that down. Sorry, I'm kind of off camera there. I'm going to glue that down to the bottom, leaving a little bit of a green border. And so that way when my card opens, that's how it will sit when the recipient opens it. We'll add a little bit more of that grass to the bottom. I'm not going to show you how I make the other card because it's super simple, basically the same, just a little bit different on how we decided to put together the front. But yeah, check it out. We've got an easel, and then we have this other cute little card that goes with it. You've got your some friend and greetings and salutations. These are so much fun. All right, so if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And be sure to check out all that Miss Ink Stamps has going on over on their blog, Facebook page, and Instagram for more crafty inspiration. Thanks for stopping by, and we will see you soon.